Welcome to the Lost Signals Discusses Film and TV. Using the revolutionary Manzor-Mosi Thurlow scale,
or MONS,
we scrupulously review these art forms with an emphasis on narrative structure. Join us for another entertaining episode. Hello, and welcome back to the Lost Signals Reviews Film and Television. We are getting into Oscar season here, and as such, we've been trying to review a few movies that may or may not
looking like pretty good possibilities.
Be coming up for Best Picture. So, as far as today's goes, we watched Roma, and we are going to be reviewing it. So, I'm Steve Ramosi, your host, joined today by Jonathan Manzer.
Hola.
And Scott Thurlow.
Will someone please clean up all this dog shit?
And I believe Ian's got a log line for us.
Roma, a slice of life
Slice of life.
slice of life film that is atmospherically somewhere between Schindler's List and Napoleon Dynamite.
Yes. It resides comfortably between those two films.
Yeah. Indeed. All right, well, why don't you keep going with the plot there, eh?
All right, so it's actually a fairly, as I mentioned just now, it's a slice of life film where you're following a maid for this well-to-do family in Mexico City.
In 1970, I believe.
Yeah, into 71.
Yeah.
And she ends up getting knocked up, is kind of upset with the situation as the father does not want anything to do with it, and threatens violence if it's ever brought up again. So she's afraid that she's going to lose her job because of this. Meanwhile, the family that she works for is itself breaking apart. Mm-hmm. The patriarch of the family has left them and leaving four kids.
Four kids, a grandmother, and a wife.
Mother. And the mother and the maid actually bond over the course of it, finding that kind of developing a new family there.
Yeah.
But it's also, that's a framework for what I imagine is the director reminiscing about what his childhood was like in Mexico, because I feel that a lot of scenes in this were
sort of
transplanted memories, and it works really well for building a very, very believable world there. And I feel I know much more about the director after having watched this and what his life was like prior to becoming a director.
Yeah, I think that the film does a really good job of showing this life, and for the first, hour or slightly more of it, it was an interesting movie, but perhaps more so visually than plot-wise. Yeah. But it really picks up towards the end, and is just a really interesting way of showing what's going on in these characters' lives, and I really enjoyed it a lot. But that said, actually, you know what? I'm probably going to give this a 3, just because even the parts that I thought were slow were strongly done.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
In terms of the visual storytelling and the script as well.
Well, I was somewhat debating that too. Because as you mentioned, it's basically it's both mundane but also not, at least at times. So the plot is, as you said, this is this woman's life and what she's dealing with, and it's a year roughly, that chronicles her adventures, if you will.
Yeah.
So what's happening? So I don't want to say I was bored at any time. I wasn't, but it is definitely a slow burn, for sure. So there were weaker parts of the plot. I think I'm looking at a strong 2, but I could be convinced of a 3, because you're right, Steve. I do agree that it picks up a bit at the end, the latter third, we'll say, of the film.
Yeah,
something like that. But I think it's very well done and more than competently directed and put together and acted and portrayed and everything like that. But I don't know if it's just enough for a 3. But I could be convinced. So that's what I'm looking at. So what do you guys think?
It bounces between slice of life, absurdist
like
humor,
surreality of it. You're right. Yeah, exactly.
and straight up great tragedy towards the end. And you're absolutely right; it does pick up, but I was never bored throughout it. It's just that
see what I mean? Like
there's weird things that are like interesting vignettes that almost have nothing to do with the plot that happen throughout this work. Giving it, I'm leaning towards a strong 2 as well, just because the style carries a lot of this movie, and that's not to say that the narrative is bad. It's just not.
It wouldn't be what it is without the style attached to it, for sure.
It's really a vehicle for the style. So I'm going to give it a 2 on that. Roll.
Yeah, I think I'm sticking with that now, unless you got any final.
I would say I'm not going to try and convince you guys to give it a 3. I don't think, but I would say that those elements that are seemingly unconnected with the plot are more concerned with characterizing these people and like showing who they are than showing kind of what's going on in the movie. And I think that's what a lot of this movie is, and it's how it's told, and that's definitely up for debate as to how you look at it in terms of the plot. So I don't have anything wrong with, I'm not that you guys giving it a 2 is I completely understand that.
Sure.
So I think I'm going to stick with a 3 though on that. And
yeah, that's fair. Like I said, it's pretty close, but for me, just very strong 2, just not quite enough for a full 3. But very well done overall.
All right. So let's move on to themes with Scott.
Yeah, man. So like again, it's basically it seems we find ourselves doing kind of these slice of life pieces in general, at least more recently. So it's like it's what happens, like dealing with life, and sometimes the highs and lows and what comes along with it. Especially you might probably bring up classism again because it's through the viewpoint of a servant worker essentially who lives and works in a more well-to-do, higher class family's house in Mexico City. So like there's certainly that feel to it. Like she's part of the family, but also she's still a worker. So like there's a couple of scenes where she's sort of hanging out with them, but then like, oh, can someone go get me a cup of tea? And she has to go up and go get it. Like stuff like that. And of course, like, and she deals with basically a miscarriage, a stillbirth, like towards the end. So there's dealing with like tragedy of life, things like that happening. So I think it's all like just there. It's hard to describe. Like, I certainly think this themes would deserve a 1. I don't think there's a lot of them, but I think it's just portraying like this is what it was like, and just basically a character study, a character piece, more or less, and not just for Cleo, but certainly she's the focal point, but for the family as well, like surrounding it and like what's happening with them and the troubles that they're going through and their of the people of their family life. So like that's pretty much like fine for me. I'm gonna give it probably a solid 1. But unless you guys got anything else you specifically want to talk about or saw in there that I did not, go for it now.
Well, I think when you discuss like the class warfare situation, I think that's a big part of it. You get to see like almost the like upstairs downstairs situation in a fairly well-to-do Mexican family's household, and you also get to see kind of the unrest that's happening in Mexico City at the time. At the time
in general, true.
And students getting shot out on the streets, and it's a really
what the 70s were.
Yeah, I mean it's a really intense look at that and kind of discussion starter about that type of stuff. I think that part of the film is pretty strong, and like you said, that there's a lot in there also about kind of the bonds of family, like like people coming in and out of your life, especially men being kind of assholes to these women in this movie. And I think that it handles all that stuff pretty well. But anything else, Ian?
Actually, a couple things.
Okay.
So I am usually not the type of guy who likes picking out visual elements as thematic and like the motifs running throughout. But it places a number of them throughout, so there's well worth bringing up. Plane flying.
Yeah.
A symbol of, I guess, Cleo.
Cleo.
I always get that wrong. Cleo. And usually a metaphor for escape, the desire to leave, but you're trapped on the ground. They have cars as a representative of masculinity, with the father figure having his Galaxy, which doesn't fit into the garage.
It just barely fits. Which is sort of, sorry, before you go on, that was sort of like the humor part of it.
It was a running gag almost,
Yeah, exactly.
But to the point where as the family collapses, that car gets destroyed, and eventually the wife replaces it with a more practical car. But it's also, you see the house get destroyed over time. Not greatly, but like subtle hints,
disheveled, if you will. Yeah.
Until the father leaves completely and takes everything with him that he feels is his. But again, the rebirth there of that family unit. You have the dog, or not only the family's dog, but also the dogs in that one more rural set piece that they did, where they have all of the former dogs' heads hanging upon the thing. But in a way, they're treated better than the servants, and are also representative of the servant class there, of the easily replaceable. But you're a member of the family. Don't worry, we're gonna behead you and put your so we can remember the war.
They had a dog there from like 1911, I think they said.
Yeah. So there's good visual representations of the themes going on here, which are both themes you two brought up earlier.
No, you're right. Good call on that. Yeah, I think it's pretty strong. I think it's a strong one. I think it seems from all of us. Deservedly so.
Definitely. One's all around.
Yep.
And that's going to take us to antagonists with me. And I guess it is guys being assholes.
I was going to say life will kill you.
Martial arts.
Yeah, but specifically dudes were the antagonists of both of these women.
Kind of. Like, yes, that's certainly true to agree. I'm not going to argue against that. But I also think it's their position in life. Like, in general.
What do you mean? I mean, they're very differently positioned.
That's what I'm saying, though. I think that's
their
also
position
part of it.
in life had no bearing on who was antagonizing them.
I'm almost saying I think the classism angle is also part of antagonists. At least that's how I'm looking at it. You're absolutely right, though. Yes,
sure.
The Fernan, Cleo's former lover, I guess, who then sort of like distances himself the second she tells him that she's pregnant, and then the collapse of the doctor and his wife.
And those two things happen like basically at the same time.
Sort of concurrently, yes, true.
And it's, it was, I thought that was really interesting that like they're both dealing with the people that they're trying to depend on, leaving them at the same time and kind of going through that and becoming more of a family because of it.
Rich or poor, men will still screw you over.
All right, well said, I suppose. But no, I'm just saying, I just think both of those angles are contained therein. But there's certainly, I'm not going to argue against what you just said, because I think I also agree that's definitely there.
Yeah.
And I certainly believed that the characters were antagonized by what was happening, by what they were doing, and what was happening to them as well.
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's the strongest thing for me, is that there was a sense of, even as their lives were falling apart, they were struggling to try to put them back together, and there's this real
they're like desperately holding everything together.
Yeah, push and pull of like them trying to hold their lives together and just the bottom falling out underneath them kind of constantly. And I really liked how that was handled in terms of this, and I think that goes towards antagonist and protagonist in terms of this. But
oh yeah, true.
I'm gonna give antagonist a strong one.
I'll say one final thing, that I think it wasn't like overdone, didn't hit you over the head with any of this stuff. It was just it all felt very natural and organic, and I think that certainly applies to other questions. But in this one as well, I just wanted to mention that it wasn't like too extreme, like too over the top, too like exaggerated, I guess I'll say, which makes sense in the framework of the film. But I just like the fact that it wasn't hammered home maybe as often and as hard as it could have been.
Yeah,
if it was handled differently.
Well, it showed the repercussions of the acts more so than the direct acts.
Exactly. And I think that was very effective. Yes. Yep, good call.
Yeah. So, one's for each.
One's all around, I believe, yep.
All right, sounds good. Ian, let's move on to protagonist.
Okay, so, Miss Cleo.
I'm Cleo. You're a Libra, ain't you, darling?
Madam Sophia.
Sophia, yep.
I will give them, although it's definitely Cleo's movie, and she does the actress does a phenomenal job.
Yep, for sure.
Especially for not being an actress. The understated performance she gives
it's so realistic because she wasn't like a classically in quote trained actress.
But I don't think that the film would have hit home as it did if it wasn't for the two of them. and being able to see the parallel between the two very similar events happening there. So yeah, I'm going to give them a very strong one.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I think they both did a great job. Certainly, Cleo's actress. I'm sorry, you have her name over there, Steve. I don't have it on here.
Yeah, it's Yelitsa Aparicio.
Yes, sorry for mispronouncing, but Yelitsa. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But regardless, she did a fantastic job. And as I don't know, it's tough because I'm not sure if I should count Senora Sofia as, but she certainly is there throughout. And you're right, like that, you could sort of see a dynamic between their two stories and their two experiences and struggles together. So I guess having just said that, then I am more inclined. It does make sense to sort of put them together, but certainly it's Cleo's story through her eyes, like first and foremost. But regardless, they certainly both did a great job, I think, and like I said, believable and just following along with these characters' struggles, and you sort of get drawn in along with them because they did such a great job of selling it.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think I agree. I think it's both of them. You see a lot of Sophia's story. You see her change and grow as a character, and you do see things at times like we're looking at the story through Cleo's viewpoint,
right?
But you kind of get you get her viewpoint as well.
Yeah, you're right. That's true.
Say.
Very true.
So, I mean, I don't have much more to say than what you guys just said. I think that you put it pretty well. And the two of these actresses did a phenomenal job. As you were saying, Yelitsa Aparicio, which I'm sorry, that's probably a horrible, horrible pronunciation, but she was phenomenal and had never acted before. And I forget what her name is, Marina de Tavira, who played Sophia, had been an actress for a long time, and I think it was I was reading an article.
We did some research precast on this movie.
They were saying how different the experiences were for each one of them, and how much harder it was for Marina to get into this movie because there was not as much of a script to lean on, whereas Cleo was like a blank slate, so it was much easier to get her into that mode of acting. So, yeah, but I'm going to give them both full credit. I think they did a great job.
For sure.
And that is going to take us to supporting characters, Scott.
One for Boris, which is the dog, their family dog. He was constantly there. Like, I mean, I say that jokingly, but I think you mentioned, like, he sort of, like, represented some kind of aspect or angle of the family and their situation.
May I just bring up a quick thing that I forgot to mention earlier? So there's one scene I really like where they show the caged birds inside the caged garage where the dog is caged as well.
Yeah,
and I think
true.
Going back to the dogs representing the servants, they're caged dogs as well.
No, that's a good point. You're right. You could certainly get the elements there. But, I mean, so the other characters then would be like the grandmother who lives with them, and I guess all their 4 kids who are constantly causing chaos, and they're trying to like deal with the household of 4 kids while her marriage is falling apart, and while Cleo's dealing with her pregnancy and the aftermath of that. It's like they're all fine. I mean, they're certainly believable as jerk ass kids because that's what kids do. But like, of course, they had like, especially the daughter was of course more sympathetic, or at least they portrayed her as such. I would say. Yeah. So like she was less kind of a little asshole than the two boys were, and even like the youngest boy was sort of sweet at most times when he was like interacting with Cleo. I do like that all the kids had their own personalities for sure. Yeah. And like that was I loved the little. Who's his little one? Pepe? I believe so, yeah. His talking about when he used to be old a couple times, and like I it's love like those metaphysical ruminations. It seems. No, so they're all good. Like, and
when I was older, I was a sailor.
Yeah. We mentioned the 2 male figures, Fermin and Mrs. Sophia, I suppose. Yeah. I don't even remember this. Alejandro, I think maybe, or something like that.
Dr. Antonio,
yeah. So like whatever, they were there, but they served the point of what they needed to, of course, within the story. So like, were they amazingly portrayed? No, but like, they didn't really kind of need to be. They were perfectly fine. Mm. I mean, this technically like this could be a huge supporting cast because then you have the female doctor who attended, who helped Cleo when she was in labor, like all that, like the entire city and like their friends and family and everybody around that.
Absolutely true.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So like in theory. Like I would like to give, maybe this is more style, but like the random like the bands who are marching up and down the street the whole
Yeah.
time, or like they got little guys with little steam, like fucking like chunk going across there. Like that to me was like one of the surreal running gags that kept happening every time. Most times they come back to the street, like something bizarre or just off-putting is happening there
Yeah,
outside their house.
it's really interesting. There were some characters that seemed to be just elements of style, like Professor Zovek,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
The Latin lover.
the Latin lover,
himself.
played by a Latin lover. Look it up. That's his credit.
and even the dog, I would say, is almost that. But like and then you have like Adela,
Right, I forgot to mention her.
Cleo's friend, and the grandmother who goes through some shit.
Yeah, I mean, she's
in this movie.
She's not really a one-note character either. She's there for like a couple of important events and scenes for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think all collectively. So I'm not going to pick out one, or because, as we just said, there's kind of so many of them, but they all add to the feeling and the believability of, like I said, the world and the family and Cleo and the changing situations and how they deal with whatever problems are cropping up. So I think collectively, I'm giving them a solid 1 overall, with no one real standout, but that's fine.
Yeah.
I want to talk more about Professor Zavik.
Okay.
Who's sort of the Uncle Rico of this, but the first time you see this man, he's trying to pull a car with his teeth on television.
On television, I guess he has a famous show
And I
that he does that
never thought I would see this character appear again.
Little did you know.
When he shows the transcendental state of Cleo, I don't know. There's such weird things that happen in this that are so wonderful that
they seem disconnected, but somehow they all fit.
It's almost Wes Anderson like in a lot of the things that just like pop up out of nowhere.
I see what you mean.
Well, we'll talk about that in style, but yeah.
But
no, you're right. I get you.
To the point, not only is Mexico City beautifully developed, but this absurd underlying nature to it is also developed. So
that's actually a good point, and probably even more evidence for a very strong 1 for secondary supporting.
All right, so 1's all around for supporting.
Yep.
And that is going to take it to dialogue, and I'm going to be on dialogue. So I really, really enjoyed the dialogue in this movie. It's very understated. It's very simple.
I mean, it's the daily stuff that people say in day-to-day
but
interactions.
It's so... Like, a lot of it is so riveting, and you don't even realize why until you're like... Or that you're so riveted until you're way into a conversation or something like that. I really enjoyed it. I think it's handled really well, and yeah, I mean that's pretty much it.
Yeah, so like if we hadn't mentioned it, this film is subtitled, so there's that factor to it. But yeah, like as I said, it's sort of the mundane stuff, but somehow like it's still very compelling, as you just said, Steve. Like regardless, because of the portrayals and because of the strength of the acting.
Yeah, and
like you said, like it wasn't quite scripted. So like, hey, insert domestic scene here and take it away. So like that's why I think it adds a lot and helps goes a long way to making it feel very natural and believable as the story unfolds and the characters interact with each other and grow and change, at least to a degree. So yeah, like there's nothing I don't want to say like stand out about it, but it's nothing like it's not your snappy like or Sorkin-esque shit or like Coen Brothers or whatever, right? But it's so organically again believable to keep overusing that it totally works, and I can't give it a 0.
Right.
So they have a porque moment in there when a student gets shot by the government forces, or
when they're clashing with
I suppose the martial arts forces,
which is just another super bizarre thing.
And the lover of the student is like, "Why?" Or like, "No," and then says briefly "porque."
Yeah,
and I'm like, "Yes, I'm glad this appeared as well." But actually, as a linguist,
yes,
I was very intrigued by the fact that this was both done in Spanish and in
Mextec or Mixtec, I believe it is, which I didn't really know much about or anything about.
I actually looked up a little bit of it as we were more of an indigenous kind of language. Yeah. Very rare nowadays, but nonetheless. I liked the use of it early on to show the class difference.
Good call.
And also the not only the wealth, but like kind of the European kind of Hispanic
Sort of divide
and the
between that,
kind of Indian Hispanics in that region. I don't know much about it, so I'm not going to go too far in, so I don't make myself sound like an idiot. But I know there's that difference in how those two groups are treated.
Yeah.
I wish they, being selfish, I wish they did a little bit more with it. But I still like that it included those two distinct languages.
There was even the point where right in the beginning where
Yes.
the kid comes in and he's like, "Stop! What are you talking? You gotta speak Spanish or whatever." But
yeah, you're right. I forgot about that, but it was there.
It was a nice little nod to that.
We don't speak indigenous languages in this area.
Yeah.
We speak Spanish. So.
In this house, we obey the laws of thermodynamics, of course.
I think that's a strong one for me.
Yeah,
I think you
agree.
guys
Pretty strong one.
sound the same?
Yep.
Okay.
I think so.
So let's move on to style. And that's going to be you, Ian.
1.
God damn, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This was one of the most beautiful movies I've seen in a very long time. The use of camera work, the use of juxtapositioning the background with the foreground and having... So I'm going to tell a little tale I enjoy. So right at the near the end of the film, when the family finds out or when the mother tells her family, and Cleo's there, saying
that their father is not coming back.
Yeah, exactly. Like there's a scene where they're all kind of eating ice cream very somberly, and there's a giant crab in the background and a wedding going on.
Which is the first thing you notice, and then you notice the wedding.
It's like part of the venue. It's like like giant crab shack or whatever, right? It's really bizarre, yeah. But it works.
It's so fun to watch though, and the way he crafts it so that it doesn't happen immediately. It just you realize the crab, you're looking at the crab, then the wedding starts happening. It's beautifully crafted. And this entire film is masterful in its craft. Sound design, soundtrack, all of those. So I'll let you guys talk about that.
Yeah, man, I'm not going to go anything too specific because you sort of covered a lot. Like, you have to see this film for the style. It's probably the strongest part, if not one of the strongest, matched with, like, maybe protagonist, as you just said. But, yeah, like, it's in black and white, too. So I don't think it would be as enjoyable if they colorized this, if it was shot in color. Like, there's something about the black and white that adds to it, for sure. And, of course, all the angles, like the long pans, the slow, like, 360 degrees, like turning around, like just the huge, very long tracking shots, like all that stuff is fantastic, and it's impressive to watch, and it never got old, never like, oh no, I've seen it, like it kept being fresh throughout the whole movie, which is it's a little over 2 hours as well. So like that is an impressive feat to me, and yes, the style in this movie is something to certainly be seen and appreciated.
Yeah, it is visually incredible. The visual, like the sight gags throughout this movie, like the crab and the wedding, and are just great. Like the dog constantly jumping up at the door, the parades running down their streets,
exactly that kind of stuff. Yeah,
all that stuff is great, and it just adds like such great momentum to visual momentum to the movie.
I like that.
On top of that, I wanted to mention the sound design, which is stellar. Just one of the scenes that really pops out, or that I remember really well, is when the kids are playing in the ocean, like very, very much at the end of the movie, and Cleo has to like wade in and save them from drifting off into into the great beyond. But the sound of the ocean is so spot on and like perfect, and like the feeling and just conveyed so perfectly the feeling of trying to like get to somebody that's out in the ocean and trying to like get there faster, but you can't because the waves are battling you, and like the sound design of that was so perfect.
Yeah, for sure.
And that happens throughout. Like there's a real mix of very quiet moments and very loud moments that I think is done really wonderfully. And I mean, the style in this movie is really impressive, and as you mentioned, Ian, the cinematography and the visual storytelling is some of the best I think I've ever seen in anything. It's up there with like really, really great movies. So that's gonna be a 1.
Yeah, I'll just
for me.
You mentioned one scene. I'll just add on one more scene. The one that I thought was also quite funny and specifically for sound design is when they're on, I guess it was like their New Year's vacation, like
Yeah.
retreat, whatever, and like they're having a picnic, but then other people are like firing guns in the background and shit.
Yeah.
Like it's again, it's totally bizarre, but somehow like everyone acts as if this is what they do, I guess, at this place and
So
at
great.
this time of year.
And the sound of the fire.
Yeah.
When the fire.
And there's a
starts.
fire in the woods, and they have to go, fight it and put it out.
The guy dressed up as a
Singing.
Krampus-like creature,
A Krampus-like figure.
just singing in the foreground as people are fighting the fire in the
Yeah,
background.
that was one of the most surreal moments.
And as the tree falls down, you hear it like come down
Yeah.
behind him as he's singing. He just doesn't break or stop
yeah,
at all.
so like it's all that stuff, but like it totally works. Like it sounds like maybe worse than it does on paper, like describing it, but when you see it, you will be, I think, quite impressed.
Yeah,
So that's, I think, all evidence for a very strong one.
defo. All right, cool. So that's ones all around for style. And Scotty, we're gonna go to you for recommendation.
Yes, I do in fact recommend Roma. Like you said, we might not have seen this film were it not for the fact that it's looking like a pretty good, strong Oscar contender. But even remove that from it, like, yeah, it's a damn good movie. You should see it. Oh, it's on Netflix, by the way, PSA, so it's easily available.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's really well done, and it's from the same director, if you hadn't mentioned, as Gravity and of Children of Men and Etum.
Itu Mama
Temien,
Temien, yeah.
Right, so like he certainly has a bit of a pedigree there, and this I think is one of the strongest films I've seen this year, and I think I definitely fully recommend it.
It's weird because if you hate black and white films and you hate subtitles,
You're gonna hate
not
this and
gonna
like
like
this,
this.
yeah, of course, but
But if you like watching film as art, then this is a movie for you. And that's my qualifier on it. But overall, I think I would recommend it more often than I wouldn't.
100%.
Yeah. I wouldn't recommend this to everybody I know by any means, as you said, because it is a very artsy, type of film. But it has a great. There's something about it that like just really brings you in, and
exactly.
And I would, as you said, I would recommend it more often, I think, than I wouldn't. I think if you're looking for like a movie to, eat popcorn and watch with your and hang out with your friends, this probably ain't it. But there's an experience that comes along with watching this movie, and that's worth it, I think.
Yeah,
for me.
well said.
So I'm gonna also give it a 1.
Yep.
And that will bring us to the end here, unless anybody else has anything else
Nah, man.
to
not
talk
that.
about.
I think I know what the scores are. But even I think, figure this one out.
Yeah, well, we gave it, you two gave it 9s, and I gave it a 10, which is an aggregate score of a 9.3?
Yes.
Yep.
And that
I think
is
that's pretty deserving.
pretty good.
Yeah, like I said, good. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think that wraps it up for me. That's a good score, I think.
Yeah,
for
well,
this,
I hope
like-
it does make it into the Oscar noms. That way, we didn't really I don't want to say like we wasted our time watching this film because it's a good film in either way.
Yeah.
But ostensibly, we're doing this for the Oscars, so hopefully
Yeah.
it'll make it in. And I think,
Well, it's going to at least make best foreign language film.
it certainly deserves, I think, to be in the conversation now,
Yeah.
having seen it, and I can see why it's getting the buzz it's getting. And yeah, it's quite worth it and damn well done.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us here on the Lost Signals Reviews Film and TV. I have been your host, Steve Ramosi, here along with Jonathan Ianmander
I got to go take my pants off and play some rock and roll.
and Scott
I
Durrell.
gotta go chain with Professor Zarek. See you next time. Whatever his name is.
Zovek.
Zovek. Good night.
Editing and engineering by Stephen Hermosi. Music by Christopher Morgan. Check us out on YouTube and iTunes for the shows, and on Facebook and Twitter for updates. Or Mott's?